All right, it is 6:33 and we have a quorum, so I'm calling the September 16th meeting of the Amherst School Committee to order. All members who are present in person, so we're going to start with our first agenda item, which is public comment. So we have some, I'll just share first that we have about 15 emails in public comment that have been attached to board docs in PDF form. So I encourage committee members and the public to read them. They are almost all about the Caminantes program and encouraging the school committee to work towards keeping that program going into the 6th grade when 6th graders move to the middle school. We have one voicemail, which I'll play at the end, but I'm going to start with the in-person signups. So we typically allot 15 minutes total for public comment and 3 minutes per person, but I have some discretion to extend that if there are more people who wish to speak. So I'm just going to start with the first person, Vanessa Gordon, and I'm going to time you at 3 minutes when you start talking. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. So I'm Vanessa Gordon. I am the parent of a 4th grader at Crocker Farm and a 9th grader here in this high school who also attended Crocker for the entirety of his elementary school. And I'm here to just comment briefly on the proposed redistricting for the exciting new school project we have. And I just want to start by saying I'm very excited about the new school and creating a better learning environment for all of the kids in our community. I think this is a wonderful thing for our community. And I'm also aware that these moves inevitably have disruptive elements and they require some changes that may not always be experienced equally among our community, and it's actually necessary, though, for what's good for our community as a whole. So I wanted to preface my comments with that. With this in mind, however, I would like to ask for more information about why the proposal for redistricting plans to swap kids who are currently districted in Fort River into Crocker Farm while moving our neighborhood south of Amity and Main Street down to the Amherst College Golf Course into the new school building. Right? I understand that there are considerations of balancing different demographics and enrollments. However, I also think there needs to be a priority placed on continuity of learning community beyond our neighborhoods, right? I believe that as much as possible, it should be a priority for kids to finish elementary school in the learning community in which they started, particularly for kids who only have a year or two left in elementary school. Given the plan to move 6th graders into the academy and the middle school building, my child, for example, would need to leave the school and peer group and teacher community she's been part of for 5 years to move to the new school for 1 year and then move to the 6th grade academy and then move to middle school. This feels unnecessarily disruptive to me when there is an option of simply not swapping Crocker students with students currently enrolled in Fort River, who will also have to undergo a similarly disruptive series of transitions and displacements from their school community that is moving as a group into the new school. So I would just like to get some more information on this proposal. I know this is the first kind of outing of the proposal and we're at the beginning of a process, but I just wanted to share my concern and also just to encourage you to emphasize the continuity of learning communities as much as possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person is Ethan Todros Whitehill. Go ahead.
Hi, nice to see all you. My comment is very similar to Vanessa's. I'm a parent of a 2nd grader and a 6th grader at Crocker Farm. We lived in Shutesbury for 10 years and then moved to Amherst a couple years ago. My daughter coming in the middle of the year coming into 4th grade, it was a difficult switch to make, getting used to a new school, new students, new community, and new everything. Similar to Vanessa's point, with the proposals on the table, you're asking, dozens of families and kids around town to go through the community, to go through that same experience. And I know that sometimes happens when people move, but this is not because of any decision that the families have made. It's just to sort of for whatever reason, the balances need to be made. So I also want to know about why we should be moving one district in and another district out, given how disruptive that is. But also want you guys to consider the idea of if those sort of shifts need to be made, thinking about some kind of grandfathering clause to allow kids to continue to finish their time out at that school, or maybe even it's in the form of allowing them to school choice into their old school. I'm not sure the best way of doing it, but I do think that the priority needs to be on the continuity of the experience and making a gradual transition so as not to be disruptive to those kids who are so comfortable and so happy, because it's so difficult switching to a new school. And that's all I'm here to say. I know it's a difficult process ahead of you guys, and so I wish you luck and grace in navigating it.
Thank you. Vince O'Connor.
I plan to have a written statement, but I will be spending the week driving back and forth to the delivery place at Cooley Dickinson with a neighbor's family. So I want to commend the superintendent for just not throwing out what was the idea of a previous administrator, but doing a staff survey, thinking through things about a sixth grade academy. And again, this was the brainchild of a previous superintendent, and it was done. I was there. I watched the concept come out of his mouth when it became quite clear that the regionalization proposal for the elementary schools that are in the region failed, which was ill-fated from the beginning. It was a waste of taxpayers' money. But then this proposal came out, and it was clear within a year or two that it had not been thought through at all, that there were all sorts of costs involved. And I am hearing really distressing things about the reaction of the staff. And for publishing the survey, I think it's also, the superintendent needs to be commended, because it didn't add to the advantage of the sixth grade academy. It's quite clear that there are going to be serious problems. There could be a substantial amount of pupil leakage from the fifth graders who will end up in that academy next September, and it will cost the school district lots of money. And every year that academy continues, it will cost the school money, and eventually it will disrupt both the regional schools and the elementary schools. The folks in town hall would love to see both these school districts go to hell. And I think that this sixth grade academy is in a sense the road to perdition, to use the title of a movie from not too long ago. And I would just urge the superintendent to look into the actual cost of kids deciding, their parents deciding not to have this sixth grade experience isolated from the rest of both the middle school and their elementary school. And the year after year after year cost that it is going to impose on the school district. It is a disaster waiting to happen. And I urge the superintendent, based on the information she has and can get from
Thank you, Vince.
the sixth grade staff, to reconsider the proposal.
The next speaker is Becca Watkins.
Hi. I want to start by saying that I know this is a sensitive subject. Comandantes is an important program for our district, but I also know we cannot stay silent when a structure, no matter how well-intentioned, creates inequities that are putting students at a disadvantage. And right now, that is what's happening at Fort River. Since Comandantes was implemented, there has been only one section of non-dual language, or Explorers, per grade. That means Explorer students stay with the same cohort from kindergarten through fifth grade, and any child that moves here after kindergarten is placed directly into that class. There's one exception to this. This has created a situation where too many high-need students are concentrated in one classroom without enough support. 80% of students in the behavioral and autism programs are in Explorers. 80%. Higher percentage of students with IEPs are in Explorers than Caminantes. These classrooms carry a level of intensity that is simply not manageable, even for the most talented and dedicated teachers. Here's what it looks like for some students and families. My son's class received 6 new students in the first 2 weeks of school. 6. His class size is now beyond ARPS guidelines. 6 new students, regardless of need, should not all land in one classroom. It's not fair or manageable for the teacher, and it's not fair to the kids. By the way, parents in this class are advocating for a full-time co-teacher. My daughter has had 7 classmates leave ARPS. They've choiced out or they've gone to a private school. They've left because the classroom has become too challenging of an environment to be in. Parents and children from outside of the Explorers program have told me that they don't want to be in Explorers because its reputation is chaotic and disruptive. That has come straight from a child's mouth to me about my child's classroom. This breaks my heart. No child should be put in a position where their learning environment feels unsafe, unmanageable, or like a last resort. No teacher should be expected to carry this level of need without adequate support. I want to be clear, this is not about the teachers. Our teachers are incredible. This is about structure. Right now, 1/3 of Fort River students are at a disadvantage because of how we are grouping children. I don't have the answer tonight, but I know we can do better. I'm asking you to look closely at this imbalance, to talk about it openly, even though it's hard, and to work towards a solution. I'm also asking you to consider all this information when you think about the K-6 restructure and how it's implemented. Every student, whether in Caminantes or Explorers, deserves a safe, supported, and equitable education. And I pulled public data from the district, and I used some of it tonight. I'm happy to share it with you and answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew Hart. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who came in after I pulled the clipboard who wants to give public? Come on up, Angelica. Yeah.
Thank you. So as you're considering the restructuring of K-6, I'm here to plead with you to support extending the Caminantes dual language program. I wanted to share with you a bit about why it's important to me and my family. I came to this country from Colombia when I was 10 years old with 0 English. It was thanks to programs like Caminantes that I got a leg up. I was able to learn English quickly, and it made a big difference for me to be able to thrive and take advantages of opportunities to get the best education possible, gaining admission as a first-generation immigrant into the top colleges. But something that was always hard, especially in attending elite institutions, was the loss of my culture. I was always the only Latinx and Spanish-speaking person in many environments. The pressures of being in English-only environments meant, at least for family members like my brother, that he lost his ability to be bilingual and had to relearn Spanish later in life. I worried the same fate for my daughter. When she first started speaking as a little girl, just over there, I spoke to her in Spanish. But it's so hard to become bilingual when everybody around you speaks English. It wasn't until Caminantes that a whole new world opened up for her. In this world, everyone spoke her mother's language. And there was such a sense of pride. Pride in learning about Spanish-speaking countries like my own Colombia. I remember I got tears when she worked on a project on writing mini books about Latin American countries, our food, music, cultures for her 2nd grade class. Unlike her cousins, she's also reading at a grade level in Spanish too. She also wanted me to tell you that she wants to continue to learn because she wants to be able to talk to her relatives and her abuelitos, her grandparents. She gained such a confidence and a sense of pride in being a Latina and a Spanish speaker. If she and others were to lose this, it would be more than a loss of language. It would be the loss of opportunities for cultural understandings for her friends, who are non-Spanish speakers, and cultural pride for her and other Latinx classmates. It would be devastating. People like my fellow Latinx folks, as you are aware, are today under attack. ICE raids are the new normal. Today, more than ever, we need programs like Caminantes. They are places of sanctuary and refuge, and for others, an opportunity to build a world that I know is still possible, one of multicultural unity, understanding, and belonging. Please keep Caminantes beyond 6th grade. Please also expand it and continue it into high school. It will be one of the best investments in our collective future that this town will ever make. Keeping our school districts excellent and competitive, especially as we continue to see many in our district exit for charter schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, come on up. Yep. And you want to talk to?
Hello, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm a newish parent here in the district and a new resident of this beautiful town. As I have three brief points I'd like to make if I have time.
Just your name, please.
My name's Jeff Conant, live in North Amherst. As a Fort River parent with a strong belief in human rights and security for all, and indeed in the U.S. Constitution and the rule of law per what we've just heard, I'm concerned that there is no collective plan or no communication of a collective plan or protocol for the eventuality of an ICE raid at our schools. We know that ICE is operating aggressively in Massachusetts, and we have strong reasons for concern that a school like Fort River could easily be targeted, as could the high school, as could any of the schools, for their unconstitutional and violent operations. And while I see there are precautions in place to prevent unwanted visitors from entering the school, the parking lots and the grounds are not secure in any way, but more to the point, if there were any such operation, I would hope that some preventive emergency response measures would be taken, and that all parents would be notified immediately so that we could get to the school to witness, because we know that that is the single best prevention against this kind of unwanted attack. At present, I have no reason to believe that I would even be informed of an ICE raid until well after the fact. And for anyone following current events, I should not have to detail how traumatizing such an event would be for our students and for all of us, and of course for any families who may suffer the direct harm of such an assault. So I'd like to see some thoughtful and clear communication from the district, the school, and or the town about this very real threat to the community's well-being, and some clearly laid out protocols and expectations. I know that other parents have the same concerns, and I'm more than happy to help put something together. On a somewhat lighter note, I have an ongoing concern that there's altogether too much use of screens at Fort River, including at lunch, and the overuse of YouTube and other video channels as rewards, distractions, or entertainment, I think is inappropriate and degrades the educational experience. I don't know if there's a policy around screen time at school, but I'd like to see such a policy developed. If there's not, with parental input. And if there is such a policy, I'd love to see it reviewed to know how and when school kids are given screen time. And this is probably a budget and capacity issue. I recognize it's, again, not the teacher's fault. It's probably a budget question ultimately. And then finally, like many other Caminantes parents, I'm concerned that Caminantes may not continue after the 5th grade. And I've addressed this concern in a separate letter to the school committee and flag it here as a matter of general concern. And I appreciate your commitment and your public service, and thank you.
Thank you. All right, last public speaker. Last public comment person, that is.
Hi, my name is Bernadette Harrigan, and I apologize, I was not prepared to talk with all of you tonight, so it's just going to be off the cuff, so bear with me. First, thank you for your work here. I know you're well considered, and I appreciate the hard work that you all are doing for the Amherst community, Amherst families, and most importantly for the kids in Amherst who attend the school. I just want to echo and reinforce the comments that Becky made earlier about the impact of the Caminantes program on the explorers, or the kids who aren't in that program. I urge that we very carefully understand that it's not either or, it's not one or the other, at least I hope that's true. But I also beg, I implore, I hesitate to say demand because I'm not sure that I can, but I tell you, I am begging you to investigate the impact of that, of the program, the structure on the explorers, the kids who are not in the Cominantes program. I ask you to slowly review and support for yourself the information and the data that Becky ran through fairly quickly because I think she thought she was timed and she needed to get it out. I'm asking you, I'm begging you, I'm imploring you to learn for yourself the impact on the explorers. Because to hear repetitively from administration that the structure is just what it is and we can't do anything about it feels inadequate. I think we can agree that it is inadequate. Your job is hard. Thank you for doing it. Please make sure that you're considering all of the impacts of the programs, the good and the positive, and let's keep that. Let's fix what we know. We all know is very, very, very broken. It is creating a place that is unsafe for a bunch of kids in Amherst. It's creating a place that is unsafe for teachers in Amherst. It should not be a common occurrence that there is a weekly evacuation from a classroom. That should not be an occurrence, period. It should not be a common occurrence. Please satisfy yourself. Thank you.
Okay, last public comment. Come on up.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Erica Sáenz, and I'm just here to share my letter as a mom of a sixth grader in the program of Caminantes. I am writing as a parent of one of the pioneer kids in the Caminantes dual language program. He is in sixth grade now, and he would love to continue his education in the dual lingual program of Caminantes in the future years. As a bilingual family, this program is deeply meaningful to us. I am originally from Ecuador, and it was very hard for me to learn English as a second language when I was older. So Caminantes is not simply about learning a second language, it's also learning about identity and culture, embracing and feeling proud of their roots without discrimination for who they are or how they look or what language they speak at home. When it becomes normal for other kids to learn and speak the same language they speak at home with their parents, they feel that they belong, and that is actually a good thing to be bilingual. Kids love the program and have worked really hard to get where they are in their dual language journey. Even kids who came from monolingual families love the program. Caminantes was presented to all families as the opportunity for their kids to become fully bilingual. After all these years, kids have gained enough confidence to speak in a second language and to feel proud of it. There is some research that show that the full benefits of a dual language program is only shows it full, like the end of it when it only continues to middle school and to high school. And ending the program in sixth grade now would really have a negative impact on kids that have been in the program since the program started, leaving their bilingual journey incomplete just when they were getting confident enough to speak, read, and write in two languages equally. Unfortunately, kids will lose their opportunity to have continuous education in a dual language program and actually be able to achieve the full benefits of bilingualism. Caminantes is a promise to the families that that to be bilingual is an asset and not a barrier. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who spoke at public comment. I have one voicemail that I'm going to play.
Hello, my name is Ellen. I'm calling on behalf of the Special Education Parents Advisory Council for the September 16th meeting of the Amherst School Committee. CPAC wishes to inquire about the plans for how specialized programs such as building blocks, AIMS, and the ILC are going to be incorporated into the new sixth grade school or academy. Could you please provide an update? Thank you very much, ARC CPAC.
All right, and that rounds out public comment. So our next agenda item is the K through 6 restructuring update. So, yeah, why don't you go ahead? Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and Amherst School Committee. So this evening, we wanted to provide an update on where we are and some of the critical steps that we've made. Note that Tim, and thank you so much, Tim, for joining us this evening, is going to start off. Tim, we procured his services to help us with the boundaries assessments, with transportation. He's been working, and so he's going to start off the presentation. I do ask, especially the individuals who had certain questions about programmatic and considerations, if they can kind of sit through, because I think some of what was mentioned in public comment I will address when I get to the considerations of the district. And so I'm going to hand it over to Tim. Tim, can you let us, are you going to go with the revised PowerPoint? Is that the one we're going to project?
Yes,
okay.
Correct.
So can you, okay. It says revised.
Yeah. And do you want me to share it from this end, or are you going to drive on that end?
We're going to drive on this end. You just, when you're ready
Okay.
to move to slides, just say next.
Terrific.
And I also like to recognize and thank all of the school leaders that came out this evening to support. And I have to say while we pull it up that I want the committee, but the community to know that this is a concerted effort. If it's one thing that I've learned in my first year is that I have very strong leaders in the Amherst district, in all 3 districts. And more so, the commitment that they have to the children and to this community is deep and vast. And so we have been working, they have been on me, very much so in terms of communication. They have been diligent, and we have been diligent in making sure that we move forward. And so this is not a Dr. Z, this is a we, and we're doing this together. And so your children are at the forefront of what we do, but we're here as a leadership team to support and to make sure that Amherst has the best possible experience as we open multiple new schools in August. So Tim, it's yours. Oh,
Great.
sorry. Can you?
Oh, terrific.
What did you do? Go ahead and talk, Tim. We're gonna try to get.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, no, and I'll do the introductions and so forth here and just try to establish some sort of groundwork in terms of what we want to accomplish tonight. I would like to just first say thank you to the school committee for the opportunity to come and present to all of you and provide this update. And also to Dr. Z and to everyone in the administration who I just echo the fact that the assistance that we've been provided in terms of data gathering and context and trying to understand the operations of the district has been incredibly helpful, and everyone has been really generous with their time, including relatively recent discussions with the principals that are leading to some follow-up discussions, which we'll address as well. And
Tim,
and that, yes.
can you present, because we had a little glitch in our projection,
Sure.
so if you can present and just move through.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm virtually certain I can figure this out. Okay.
That's great.
We can, okay, great. And so again, if my thanks to everyone who has provided support to me and the process here as part of this. And I want to point out 2 things for this evening. First is The context of this presentation is ultimately designed to do three separate things collect at the same time. The first is to give everyone an update, obviously, on what has been done to date. The second, I think, is to provide some understanding of the process that we have gone through and that we will continue to go through, because I think that gives people an opportunity to understand where additional input can be received and how that information gets fed back into the process. And then I think thirdly, it gives an indication of the manner in which we can take information that gets received from particular forums, fold them back into the models and into the analysis in order to be able to provide you with what we hope is both a set of options that are functional for the district to meet the competing interests that are always present in making these decisions, but then also offer the opportunities and the balancing of a number of constraints that we know just exist as part of the process of running the school district and trying to understand how best to use individual facilities. And so what we will do is, I want to start what I think is the beginning, and just give a feel for oh boy, so this should move. Oh, there we go. There we go. So just to provide some sense of where we're starting from and what the nature of the project was about. Ultimately, we had two components that we are doing. We're going to emphasize tonight, obviously, the enrollment projections and the boundaries, but there's also a secondary component of this that we are working through that is looking at transportation impacts of if, sixth grade is transitioned to the middle school, what does that mean in terms of impact on any kind of secondary services, particularly transportation. We won't talk a lot about that tonight, but just to let everybody know that that is a component of things that will be finished here as well. And in doing so, the way we have gone about this to date is we have gone through the process of gathering historical enrollment data, very similar to what was done as part of the scoping process for the new facility itself. Methodologically, and all of those things that go into looking at enrollment projections and so forth are very similar to the way that we use them. So it was well understood, despite the fact that they're a few years old at this point, the process that went through and what it meant. So the combination of looking at the baseline enrollment projections plus the capacity of the schools. And capacity of the schools is an interesting question that we'll spend some time on this evening, because capacity of the schools has a couple of different ways to look at it. And we've tried to address both of these in the way that we approach the project in order to offer as much both flexibility and options as we can come up with to best use the existing space. In order to do that, we've gone through a process of identifying where all the students are, of establishing all of the current boundaries, of locating the new school, of doing those things such that we can have a view of not only what density looks like around particular portions of the district, but also in the event that we are looking at the transition of neighborhoods or whatever it might be, what are the ones that could make the most sense, because we have some sense of where students are, what grade they're in, and where they're going. Being able to do that gave us an opportunity to develop draft boundaries for the new Crocker Farm and new school pairing. And I would just want to emphasize, and I know there's some anxiety around this, but I do want to emphasize the draft nature of this. Ultimately, we are doing this right now as part of an effort to receive additional feedback on where there are thoughts and concerns about what some of the boundary lines might look like, and what individual schools or administrators or the public might have concerns about. So I don't want anybody to infer from any of this that these are finalized boundaries. These are both illustrative of the process, and they are illustrative of the kinds of inputs that are necessary for us to get to the point where we can provide you a set of options at the conclusion of this study. And then again, as I mentioned, we looked at baseline transportation analysis for not only the sixth grade transition, but also some of the new school and Crocker Farm pairing and what that might look like, in order to be able to ultimately incorporate that into the final sets of analyses where we say, from the perspective of not only boundary lines, but also what some of the other secondary input costs might be associated with different sorts of options that get provided. That process has been supplemented throughout, I think, as I mentioned, by both a formal and an ad hoc set of interactions with school administrators and with most recently with building principals, to understand not only what their concerns are, but also to get some additional nuance on the manner in which existing facilities are being used, to be able to incorporate that into the review as well. And that was helpful, especially because it gives us the opportunity to continue to gather some additional feedback to understand where there might be some opportunities for us to rethink questions about capacity or rethink questions about how we're looking at the grades themselves, in order to option out some things for either or both facilities. So again, I mentioned we started with current boundaries and with students who are in district. This does not obviously map all of the kids who might be choicing into Amherst from somewhere else, just mostly to keep the size and scope of the map manageable. But so what this provides us, as I mentioned, is it gives us indications of where there's density. It gives us indications of where the existing boundaries are, because as we will talk about here in a minute, one of the things that we try to consider is a set of parameters and a set of constraints around the analysis that I think is designed to, again, balance as many at times opposing constraints as we possibly can in order to come up with a set of options for you to consider. In doing so, the next piece that we think about, and this is inherent not just in Amherst, but in any place where we've done these sorts of analyses, which is a couple of hundred places around the country. We refer to it as a trilemma, and what we mean by this is there are really two foundational components of any school use question. The foundational component is the demand side, which is the number of students and the number of students by grade. And then it's the supply side, which is the number of rooms, particularly classrooms, that we have within a building that give us the opportunity to take that enrollment in. And what we know is any change in a boundary has some influence, particularly on enrollment, but also may have an influence on the way that we think about school capacity. So what we are trying to do through this process is to understand what those trade-offs are and understand how each of the legs of this triangle get rubber banded depending on what changes. So if we have a significant spike or a significant decline in enrollment, what does that mean relative to boundaries? What does that mean relative to the use of existing facility capacity? So it is those three things that we are always kind of playing off against each other as part of this assessment. And so throughout the process, what you will hear me speak a lot about is this tension between the supply and demand side. This tension between how do we think about capacity and how do we look at enrollment and how do we do that over a long enough time period that ultimately the options we provide you are sustainable, that they are not something that 18 months from now you're going to be back here having the same conversations, because nobody wants to do that. Right? So part of the reason why we make the projections out on a 5-year basis and start to look hopefully beyond that a little bit if it's possible, and while it does get a little bit hazier in the future, the goal here is to identify what is a sustainable solution over time in order to provide that to the community as part of the options that are developed. So in doing that, one of the things, again, that we start with ultimately is a set of enrollment projections, understanding the demand side. And these are projections developed by us. In the gray are actual information gathered from the state, where we have collected information on a grade level basis, and then use that information, and I think many of you are familiar with this from the construction process and so forth, but using a cohort survival methodology, which essentially says, if we have 100 kids in kindergarten and the next year we have 90 kids in kindergarten, then we've got a 0.9% cohort survival. If we've got 110 kids in kindergarten, we've got a 1.1% cohort survival. So it becomes a really useful way of understanding, is the district's enrollment growing or shrinking? Because if it's at 1, it's staying stable. If it's above 1, it's growing. If it's below 1, it's shrinking, right? So it does provide a useful waypoint to understand that. And what we can see is over the 5-year projection period, particularly from the current year 25-26 out, which is where we started, enrollment is pretty stable. There are some slight peaks, but ultimately it's relatively stable. It's relatively stable across the grades, and so that gives us the opportunity again, now that we have the demand side of things, to start to understand, okay, how best can we match that against existing facility capacity? And in doing so, that requires us to, in this case in particular, and this is a unique characteristic of when there is a school consolidation, be it for whatever reason, but when we're going, in this instance, from 3 schools to 2, one of the things that we have to look at is what was our original capacity, what is our proposed capacity, and what's the net difference between those things, to understand what other things might be impacted by virtue of any boundary change, by virtue of any change in student demand.
Excuse
Okay,
me, Tim.
so certainly.
Did you want, will you take questions during, or do you want us to wait till the end?
I'm happy to do it with whatever way culturally is the way you all handle it. So I'm happy to do it either way.
Okay, go ahead, Deb. Can you go back to the bar chart, Tim?
Certainly.
Hi, thanks for that. What are the, I see the bars on the bar charts, but do you have the actual absolute values associated with those? I didn't.
We do. Yeah, they're not included in the chart there, but yes, we can
Are there
provide
somewhere
those.
on the presentation?
I don't think so.
They aren't in this version. No, they are not. But we can provide them for sure.
That would be great if you could send it after the fact, the data behind the, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, you can go on. Thank you.
Okay, very good. And so again, as we start to think about capacity, this is what we're trying to match that demand of students against. And the way that we try to think about this from a set of considerations for the project, ultimately there are a set of trade-offs that we're making, and what those trade-offs have a bunch of different characteristics to them. The first is, and the one that is actually easiest to think about and simplest for most people to understand, is just this question of class size. What should be the target value of the maximum number of kids in a class before we think about creating a new section, right? That's certainly an input that's necessary for us in order to be able to come up with some options. Then we think about equity, and from an equity perspective, that has a lot of different opportunities to think about it. One of the ways that we think about equity is programmatic equity. Another way that we think about equity is in looking at average class sizes, so not just the target, but when we look at class sizes across the buildings, one of the things that we try not to do is have one building with class sizes on average of 24 and the other building on class sizes of 12. Right? Because unless the facilities are only able to handle that, there is some aspect of looking to try to balance that becomes part of the analysis that we work through. I've mentioned that we think about transportation and so forth, not only from the cost perspective of transportation, but also from the considerations around the student experience and ensuring that they're getting to school ready to learn, and trying to address those questions. And once we get into the boundary considerations, what we try to do as part of this process is understand 2 things. We're aware of the disruption that can be associated with this process. And we are aware of some of the comments actually that were made earlier in terms of just understanding how best to support students as they are going through their educational journey at any given place. And so in order to maximize the use of the facility under all the constraints that we've established, one of the things that we try to think about is how do we minimize the number of students that we're actually moving, right? And so the degree to which we can both minimize the moves, but if we have to move students, we're trying to move them in neighborhood clusters or in some reasonable cluster of students that uses natural boundaries to the greatest extent possible that we can, whether that be a river or a road or something along those lines, such that what we're not doing is actually what I think has occurred across the district previously, which is essentially sort of, plopping an excavator down into a neighborhood, picking out a pile of kids and putting them in a different school, right? I mean, that's what we're not trying to accomplish, because that can be disruptive, because there's no, again, one of the things that we try to think about here is the continuity, not only of the experience, but the continuity of the boundary on an ongoing basis. And so those two characteristics of trying to minimize the number of students that we move and also maintaining those neighborhoods or maintaining some definable group of students become an important consideration once we do start looking at using the capacity and where the line needs to go. And when we do that, and when we've done that in this instance, it becomes part of the constraint set that we are looking at. And so, when we think about the constraint set, there are a number of significant things that get into them, to get included in them. One of them is obviously an interaction on any kind of growth from a development standpoint. So we've done some outreach to the town. We've talked about housing impact and where it's going to be and what the influence that might be. In addition to that, we've talked about transfers or school choice into the district, and what influence that might be. And then also whether or not there's any kind of grade reconfiguration, which in this instance, as we transition to K-5 under the models that we're building out, that grade reconfiguration is obviously something that we're thinking about as a manner in which the constraints are affected by both the class size and some of these other components that are included, like, what do we do with transfer students and what happens with housing. I've mentioned that, class size is obviously a massive input to this process. We have conducted a couple of different analyses using ranges of class size from baselines of 17 to 21 at the kindergarten and first grade level, to 19 to 23 at the second and third grade level, and 20 to 24 at the fourth and fifth grade level. And obviously that becomes an important consideration, because the degree to which, for example, in a kindergarten class with 60 students, that could mean anywhere between 3 and 4 sections, right, based on the class size criteria. And that additional room requirement might be just the tipping point that means that we can't fit all of those kids in that building, right? So ultimately what we are trying to do is to provide back to the administration, to provide back to the school committee and the community a set of options with a series of what we refer to, I think in a non-value judging way, but as consequences, right? If you were to choose to do this and you were to choose the lowest end of the kindergarten class size target, it means we need 4 sections there, which means we can't get these kids into that building, right? However, if we were to choose the 21, we could do that with 3 sections and then they would all fit. And then that gives you the ability to make a choice around what's most important from a community and from an educational and from a a fiscal and every other kind of perspective that goes into making these choices. And so those models will be provided. The second piece of it obviously is on the facility capacity. And that is just ultimately what we're looking at when we talk about the number of students in a building. And what's important to recognize is, when we talk about the number of students, the challenge here is when we look at student capacity and we look at class size targets, there may be there are in many instances actually where we can't actually load a school to that peak capacity because of the breaks in the grades. And so what's important for us is to consider not only the number of students that we can get into a building, but what is the number of classrooms that are available by particular type for us to be able to fill with those students at those given class size levels, right? And that's the process that we go through in terms of trying to find a set of options and a set of combinations that meet the criteria that are defined. And when
Tim,
we
I'm
do
sorry.
this,
Excuse
go
me.
ahead.
We have another question. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you can go back one slide.
Yep, absolutely.
My question is about the facility capacity, and I think you were just touching on this, but I want to go a little deeper. Do the numbers you give there, let's say 300 for Crocker Farm, does that come from the number of classrooms that exist times our class size targets? Or is this based on like the allowable, like, I don't know, under the fire code or MSBA or accreditation or whatever, how many, like if we packed, packed the
Yeah, yeah.
school? Yeah,
Yeah,
anyway,
it's more of the former than the latter. So it's more of what I would refer to probably as functional capacity rather than maximum allowable capacity. So one of the things obviously that influences this is what are we multiplying by, right? So for example, if we were to take 17 rooms, well, you know what? Actually, let's take 30 rooms at the new school because the math is easier. And if we were to say 30 rooms at the new school with 20 students in each, that would be 600 instead of 575, right? But that would have to be 20 on average across all of the rooms. And one of the things that we see, obviously, is we've got differential break levels across the grade levels. So again, in order to get to those functional capacities, there's some averaging that's occurring across the class size targets, multiplying by the number of rooms that are available.
Thank you, Tim. I have one more question. Bridget?
Just as a definitional question, I'm wondering about the self-contained rooms, and to the extent that they are inclusion programs, how's that factored into the class sizes?
So from our perspective, the way that we look at self-contained, and it's probably too broad a term as used here. One of the ways that we look at room use is if, for example, a room is a self-contained room that's dedicated all day to a particular program, that's relatively easy to consider, right? That comes off the table as an available room from a general ed perspective, right? So we know that. However, if we have another room that is used for multiple programs during the day, different groups of kids at different times, but it's not available to us as a general ed classroom, then it gets included in that group of kind of not available for used for other programs kind of designation from a room standpoint. And what we would need somebody to tell us is those programs are going to go away, so that room now becomes available, or it doesn't.
Thank you, Tim. You can keep going.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things, obviously, that we want to be able to take a look at is just some of this maximum capacity relative to the projected enrollments. And what we see across the 5-year horizon is actually that we start to lick the top of the maximum, or at least the designated capacity, the functional capacity that I was talking about here. Starting in the 3rd year and then kind of carrying out. Some of this, again, is based on some fluctuations in the annual projected enrollments. But what this means to us when we see these kinds of values and as we start to look at modeling here is that we need to be really careful about how we're balancing the enrollment and where they're going in order to make the structure sustainable over time, right? So what we also can identify through this is that some of the assumptions, for example, around class sizes that may hold at the beginning of the modeling period may not hold at the end. And so from a consequence perspective, one of the things that we would come back and suggest to you is to say, you know, if what we are thinking about is we're going, and I'm purely making this up. I hope nobody believes that this is like a decision that's been made, right? Like, so this is illustrative only and with quotes around it or whatever else is necessary to make sure that people don't think this has been decided already. But what has happened in other clients that we've worked with is they have started with a value that says, okay, we're going to assume 20 kids in a classroom, you know, for the first couple of years, but in order to allow everybody, and that includes the teachers and the staff and everybody else, to transition over time, by the end of the 5-year period, we might be including 22 students in a class. And that gives us some additional capacity that might be available. So there's sort of a phase-in period of changes around target class sizes and so forth. And so it's those kinds of things that, as we're thinking about optioning, we think it's our responsibility to bring back to you to say, like, this looks like it might be a challenge in the out years, and in the out years, we need to start to think about how we might try to address that. Okay, and so in doing so, boundary processes are tricky because if we're staying with the same number of schools, oftentimes what happens is we start with the boundaries and make changes at the edges to try to better balance the enrollments in individual schools. What happens in instances where we are consolidating schools or where we're expanding schools, it actually goes the other way, in that we have to start with the students and use the students to try to fill to a particular level. And so, that introduces obviously some uncertainty around how to do grade balancing and the fact that it's a year out and considering all of those things. And so one of the things from our perspective that we always talk about is it is never our goal to fill a school to 100%, because it provides us no flexibility in the event that anything outside of the baseline set of assumptions that everybody has incorporated into this could be included. So one of the things that we try to do is to think about options that give us a chance to fill a school to some reasonable percent. That percentage is different everywhere. In some instances, it's 90. In some instances, it's 70, depending on what the characteristics of the community are. But that's all becomes part of the stew, basically, here when we're trying to figure out how to cook up some options that are available to you. So, an initial proposed boundary here, and again, this is, I do want everybody to reiterate for everyone that this is not finalized in any way, shape, or form, that this is an illustrative outcome of the process that we have gone through. It provides us a starting point within which we can further highlight not only a set of concerns, but also to the degree that we need to grind down on some additional constraints as it relates to class sizes or other considerations from a programmatic standpoint. That's what this set of options does for us. Okay, so just to explain the chart here, or the map here a little bit, what we have are in the colored areas, in the peach and in the green, are a set of boundaries for the new school and for Crocker Farm. And then what we have for the lines are the existing boundaries. So what we see in the black lines to the north and to the west are the existing Wildwood boundary. When we see the black and red line into the east, that's obviously Fort River, and the red line itself outlines Crocker Farm. Now, Crocker Farm boundary overlaps the southern portion and the eastern portion of the Fort River boundary, just because they're next to each other, right? And it just so happens that in the way that we do this, the Crocker Farm boundary is on top. But what this gives us is this ultimately gives us a set of understandings around, what does this mean from portions of existing school boundaries that might transition if this were to be a scenario that you were to choose, right? And I know that's one of the things certainly that we've been trying to address and trying to ensure that everybody understands. And the way that works is what we can see is the areas in pink or peach, I guess, that are south of the red line and west of the red line are transition areas. In addition, the areas in green that are east of the red line and west of the peach area are transition areas, right? And we'll talk about each of those specifically. But ultimately, what we think this visualization does is it gives us some understanding of the magnitude of any kind of transition that might occur under this proposed scenario, and under this illustrative scenario in this case, so that people can start to understand the way that the modeling occurs on an ongoing basis.
Tim, we have a question.
Sure.
Bridget.
I'm curious how many families are affected by the shift in lines? Like, are you looking at individual households?
I think we're going to get
or how
there.
many children? And then the second question I would have is there room in this model for the type of grandfathering that some people were talking about, like phasing in?
Good questions.
Yeah, great questions. And actually, we'll get to the first one in particular, and then the second one we'll talk about how it affects the modeling. So to that end, So when we look at this transition area, so that the area highlighted in black there is that area that was west of the Peach and east of the red line. That area would be a transition from the current Fort River boundary into Crocker Farm. Ultimately, there are a total of 10 students in that area, 5 of whom are in the current 5th grade. So recognizing that our student counts are our current year student counts, and we're using them illustrative around the boundaries, mostly because we don't know where every 2- and 3-year-old in Amherst lives, right? So we can't model out where they're going to be in a year or two out. So we use this as a mechanism to be able to do that and look at it as we look back at the enrollment projections to understand how close and how consistent the tracking is year to year, grade to grade. So from, again, as we talked about in the way that considerations that we have, one of the things that we, again, are thinking about is sort of the minimizing of movement. And in this instance, we've moved a total of 10 students, 5 of whom are in the current 5th grade. And then when we look at the other area that I mentioned was south of the red line and west of the existing boundary, which is this square up top, that had a
Sorry, Tim,
collection
I'm
of.
sorry. Can you go back to the previous page?
Certainly.
I just wanted to say, I'm not good with maps, and so I actually had to get a physical map so I could look and see which streets these are. And I think the streets in black are Southeast Street, Valley View Circle, and Valley View Drive. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say that out loud.
I think that's
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah. And I don't, for the next one, I don't have all the streets in front of me, but again, that is information we can provide as soon as. And what I would just again caution is, like, let's make sure that we get to the point where it is an option that we want to consider. And then for each of the options we want to consider, one of the things that we will provide is a street list of all of the affected families.
Thanks. Okay, you can go on. Thanks.
Okay. Same process here. Counting the number of students in this square area, total of 39 students that would be transitioning from the current Crocker Farm up to the new school. You can see the grade distribution across the bottom for the current year. Really, it's the age distribution with the grade distribution. And so collectively, in order to accomplish and to address all of the criteria that have been set for us from a capacity standpoint, from an enrollment projection standpoint, from the way that we are looking at trying to do the best that we can to figure out the difference between the supply and demand kind of question, we've ended up moving a total of 49 students out of the roughly 875 total K-5 students. And that's, again, in this sort of illustrative example. Now, inevitably, one of the questions is going to be, well, the other area only has 10 kids and this one has 39. Can we leave the 10 kids and make this something else? And the answer from my perspective is we can do a lot of things, and that's part of what this is designed to highlight and to offer up for people. So, but each time we do one of those things, it has some kind of an impact. Right? It has an impact either on the available capacity that is left, or it has an impact on the number of students that we have to otherwise move, or where those students might be, or whatever it is. So again, one of the things that we will talk a lot about as we go through this process is the balancing of the individual and constraints that we have, and then the specific outcomes that means, either from any one of the parameters that we've set within the analysis.
Thanks, Tim. We have another question. Sarah, go ahead.
Sure.
Thank you. So you had an earlier slide that showed various factors you're trying to maybe maximize in some sense: transportation, maintaining neighborhoods, and you had school equity, and you I think defined that as the same programs in all the schools. But that is not the case, at least under the current plan. The new school will be the only school that has the Caminantes program, and thus it will include children in the Crocker Farm district.
Correct.
So have you included them in some sense? And that the same thing is true for some of the special education programs.
Correct.
But I think you're not, this analysis doesn't address those rooms or those kids.
The manner in which we include them is not by taking individual students and putting them in necessarily until we get a little bit further downstream. The manner in which we make sure that we can accommodate them is by using the spare capacity, right? Because as we leave spare capacity in the new school, for example, to intake Caminantes kids who might be in the Crocker Farm boundary, ultimately what we are trying to do again is to not fill classrooms and fill the school to a maximum capacity. And that provides us some of the flexibility to be able to accommodate that. And it provides it to us in both directions, right? And so the degree to which there are individual students, I mean, one of the things that we are certainly keeping an eye on, and one of the things that we have had a lot of helpful discussions about, is the scope and magnitude of the program and where all the students are coming from, in order to try to understand where those programmatic densities are and what that might mean. But the way that we're accommodating them is not saying seat number 1 is going to be set aside for Tim because he's in Caminantes, right? What we're saying is we need some capacity for the Caminantes program. And as a consequence, it means that we can only load this school to 80 or 85% of its available seats.
Thank you.
Okay. So again, and this really does come back to some of those highlighting components of it. And, you know, I mentioned earlier that we think about capacity in a couple of different directions, right? We like to refer to it as both horizontal and vertical capacity. And the way that that plays out is when we look at a chart like this, when we look at, based on individual grades and the range of class sizes that we might be thinking about, what does that mean from a count of classrooms that we need in each building to be able to accommodate them, right? So that's the sectioning count. And what that provides us is, by knowing the number of sections and by knowing the number of students, we can also then drill down into what does average class size look like across both the grades and the schools. And why that's important is because the difference between the average class size and our target class size is what we refer to as vertical capacity, right? So let's say, for example, we've got an average class size of 12 and a target class size of 18, and we've got 3 sections, right? Ultimately, what that means is we have 18 additional seats before we have to open a new section for that grade, right? So that's our vertical capacity. Once, for the sake of argument, were we to fill all of the seats in every grade at those target levels, the next thing that we look at is the horizontal capacity, which is, do we have any additional classrooms that we haven't assigned yet that can then be used to accommodate the next 18 kids? And really what would likely happen is the collection of 36, 40, 54 students would get some other distribution of that, where ultimately what would happen is class size would come down, we would create additional vertical capacity, but we would consume all of the additional horizontal capacity, right? And so the kinds of checks and the kinds of analyses that we are doing when we start to move groups of kids and when we start to think about this is to consider both of those elements of both vertical and horizontal capacity. And in looking at that, what we see, is in this instance, for example, if on the low end, we might have roughly 2 kids per section for 3 sections. So that means we could have 6 additional kindergarten students register without necessarily having any impact on the number of sections that we require, right? And that plays its way out, obviously, over all 6 of the grades, over all of the individual sections, so somewhere between 17 and 30 sections, and that's where the math comes in terms of understanding what flexibility we have in each of the individual buildings. And we use that ultimately to look at, again, this understanding of how many sections do we need at the low end of our assumption around class size, how many sections do we need at the high end of the class size, and those two obviously work in the inverse, right? Because it's the tyranny of the denominator. As I make the denominator bigger, right, I need fewer of them. So, I've got that question that lets me say, okay, that means that based on the criteria that we've set and the number of students that we have, we have somewhere between 3 and 4 rooms available at Crocker Farm and somewhere between 3 and 7 rooms available at the new school. And these are general ed rooms that then give us the opportunity to look at some of the programmatic aspects of things and say, are any of those rooms going to be consumed by something else? Are they going to be used in some other way such that, that additional or surplus capacity then gets consumed, and that gets fed back into the model to say, instead we might have 1 room available at each, or 1 and 3, or whatever the number ends up being. Right? So that's how all of these factors in that trilemma play against each other is as we think about enrollment, as we think about capacity, as we think about moving lines, it changes each one of these inputs to allow us to develop different kinds of models.
Okay, Tim, we have a question. Sarah?
Sure.
Maybe I just at first didn't understand what I was looking at. So the initial boundary impact summary, the table with the numbers of classrooms, high and low, that's the first year.
Yes,
right?
I'm sorry,
That's
right. This is year 1, right, exactly, correct.
And then,
yep.
and then that bar chart is also for the first year.
Year 1.
But then
correct.
you have a further chart, it says peak year. So
peak years.
So you've modeled out how far?
5 years.
Okay.
We've done a total of 5 years. So, I think the peak year is actually because of the way that the grades break, right? Because we have kids moving through the system, and so as we change the count of students in every grade and we change the class size, it changes the way that the grades break and how many sections we need. And I think that the peak year actually is in year 4 rather than in year 5, even though our enrollment peaks in year 5. But when we are consuming the maximum amount of rooms across our 5-year projection, this is where we end up.
Okay, so that's like the minimal swing space or available space.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Deb?
Hi, sorry. I thought my question would be resolved when we walk through this, and it's not yet. So I apologize because I'm on a different page. I don't understand the initial Crocker Farm to new school transition, page 14, how that jives with page 12. Can you help me see that a little bit more clearly? I mean, I can see the roads on that inset.
That's right. So,
but
I think I can draw on this, and so it's this section.
That's blue, but
that is the blue section on 14. I think it's 14.
No, this is, it's confusing. The red is the existing Crocker Farm, the green is the new Crocker Farm. It's confusing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yes, got it, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot on there, and it can be confusing.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Did we get to the end?
So
Okay, gotcha.
this is it, right? So next steps here, and this is a combination of things we need to do and things we need from you, is we are going to continue to have programmatic discussions with the principals and understanding what the key criteria are at each of the individual schools. One of the things that we're also doing, and again, this is part of the balancing of constraints questions, is once we have a set of options, and we will do this for this initial boundary set of considerations, just so that everybody is aware of how the process works. We'll also do a demographic analysis to make sure that what we are not doing is creating substantially different balances in the school than may exist right now, or that are outside of the window that you all are comfortable with. And so what I mean by that, and this is a relatively crude way to describe it, but just for the sake of argument, it helps clarify things. What we are not trying to create is a rich school and a poor school, right? So it is those kinds of things that we are looking at from a demographic perspective, for example, and a socioeconomic and all the rest of it, to make sure that, again, as we are able to develop different options, we can feed that back to you and say, if we do this, this is what this means, right? So that you can, again, decide what the best option available for you is. We will continue to grind down on these class size determinations and looking at average class sizes, ultimately because it's just such an incredibly important input into the process. We will be having conversations about how we are going to incorporate the preschool capacity into the overall planning. And one of the things that we have had discussions about is there's about designated space for pre-K programs and what that means again to this question of how many rooms are available to us in order to be able to fill. And so what those will give us once we resolve those four things, and frankly, as we resolve those four things, we will be iteratively creating a set of options that ultimately what we will bring back to you is either, and I don't know what the outcome of this is yet, but you know what has happened in the past is we typically will end up with somewhere between a single best example option where everything is marginally different from that, or several different options that have different characteristics associated with them in the way they either distribute kids or they use capacity. And where we're going to end up here, I don't know that yet, but that will be ultimately what we're bringing back to you.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, I'm going to start a queue. I'm going to start with Irv, Deb, and then Bridget, and then I'm calling on myself.
And that put me at the end.
Okay. Irv, you're up. Okay.
All right, thank you. This is pretty good overview. What I would want to see in the final discussions and the final way that this is going to be determined, that you put some more qualitative data in there. And that is, one qualitative data point would be how many times a person would have to move, a kid would have to move, and where they're moving from, and what are the disruptors in that scenario. Because after all, we're dealing with kids, and we need to make sure that we're doing it, when we do this, we do it in such a way we create the minimum of disruptions. As A, and B, the other thing is, when I look at this, you're also creating, you're also in effect creating school populations that are totally different from what they were before. So Crocker Farm population will be totally different than what it was before. And that means an incredible qualitative difference in terms of the environment, the culture of the school, et cetera. And that doesn't even include change of administration, change of teachers, et cetera. All those things are really things that really need to be brought into the discussion. The other thing is that I would like to recommend is that when this final report comes back to us, and your decision points are made, that we are made to understand how those decisions were made. The final thing is that the last time I went through this was years ago when we closed Marks Meadow. And that obviously tells you how old I am. But, and this is a similar kind of thing. The only thing I'm amazed at is that at that time, the entire auditorium was packed. And there was no one who liked what we did. And the reason they didn't like what we did, because we closed the school and we redistricted. Here, at least we're redistricting, but we're also closing schools. All right, so there is a lot. You know, it's one thing to put out this data and understand, and for us to understand, but it's also, I want everyone to keep in mind, especially us on the school committee, I know the superintendent is certainly in sync with this, is that these are children, these are our kids, and we need to understand the impact on them in their communities. Kids who used to get on the bus with each other will not be getting on the bus with each other. That is incredibly important to understand. And if we could just understand all of that and then communicate it back to the parents and to the community, and also try to limit the impact of those kinds of transitions.
Thank you, Irv. Deb?
Hi, yeah, thank you for this. I have a couple of specific questions. One being, did you, or how did you factor in the new expansion of the PVCICS? Because you said you mentioned thinking about charter school sending. Sarah's looking confused. Maybe I misunderstood. Oh, there he is. Well, he's actually there, I guess. True. So, did you factor in charter school sending? One, did you look at the previous district? Because this looks oddly familiar to me. This Amity Street line looks like where the boundary was before. Before we redict, so that would be useful information, because that would help you understand a little bit more historically what those populations were.
Yeah, I don't, yeah, that would be helpful. Yeah, we didn't have any of that. I don't have any of that.
Bridget's nodding. Are there population islands? Will there be population islands? Because that was one of the drawbacks of the previous, not the current, but the previous, I think.
Yeah.
We don't have any now, correct?
No, we do.
We do. We still do. Would this eliminate that?
So specific, how do you want me to answer them in a row, or how do you want me to?
I think that's all I got.
Okay.
Charter
Yeah,
school, looking at previous arrangements, and population islands. That's all for now.
So from a charter school perspective, the way that we typically end up seeing that is in the changes in enrollment. And so that's where we would see it. The opening or closing of schools isn't something that we factor in a lot, honestly. But so I think it depends on the degree to which we think there's some either significant changes that are going to occur from an enrollment perspective, or there's some significant increase in the number of potential opportunities that might cause diversions, particularly in some of the out years. Those things are not significant elements in the analysis right now.
There are. The charter school size, I mean, what's the word for it, has increased by 100 students.
And so certainly I think what we can do is follow up with the folks in the administration and get some understanding of that, because we don't have a ton of information on any of that right now.
Okay, and then the population island question.
Yeah, from the population island perspective, our goal is to not do that, frankly. We don't think that's helpful. But what we see, again, and this is where this set of opposing constraints comes down to, if what we end up with are substantial demographic imbalances between schools, and we present that to you, one of the things that may end up happening, and I'm not suggesting that this will, is that we make specific choices around neighborhoods and so forth that may result in island boundaries like that. Like, we're not big fans of them, but I think because we think it's has potential disruptions from the way that we manage the enrollment and everything else. However, the point that we end up having to wrestle with at that is, are we comfortable with the distributions in each of the individual schools for the student populations and the characteristics that are there? That's not something I can determine for you, but one of the things that we can tell you is, if we're looking to remedy this, it means we're going to have to do X. And what X might be is, we need to take this portion of this neighborhood, and because that's the only place where we can either get enough kids with particular characteristics or enough capacity to be able to remedy whatever the challenge is. So from a baseline perspective, the goal is we try not to do that.
Right. So my follow-up would then be, I see you prioritize minimizing the number of students that are moved, and that's an important issue in terms of drawing boundaries. But using a grandfathering approach and drawing boundaries that precludes busing neighboring students to different schools is a more global priority. and can be dealt with more systematically with the individual student movement that are currently existing in each school, something that can be dealt with anecdotally instead of boundary-wise.
Tim, can I jump in before you answer that?
Certainly, sure.
One of the things that I have at the end of my presentation is that is a consideration of the administration. So in the conversation, when Tim was talking about the surplus capacity and what we can do with that, in the conversations as we work with him and move forward, it would include that, hey, we're going to retain the students who are currently in these grades. Let's say we said we're going to retain the K to 5 of the 10 students from Crocker to the new school. I can't remember which way it goes.
Yeah,
But
yeah, right,
of the 10 students, 5 would be going to the 6th grade academy. We actually have 5 to consider. We would say, well, Tim, let's keep those 5 grandfathered in. What does that do to our surplus capacity? We would do the same thing with the 39. That's actually, so I say that to say that is something that I have as a consideration that we would be working with, because it's something that we would discuss as a leadership team. And then we would pose it to him, and he would come back with the model saying, this is the impact to the facility, this is the impact to this, to allow us to make the best possible decision.
Just to follow up then, just to make sure I understand,
Right.
that is a different issue than the drawing of the boundaries, because that has to do with building capacity and certainly future building usage, but not currently. So you could have in your grandfathering model, you can have a student staying in their current district, even though they've been redistricted, as a grandfathering situation, and that doesn't affect the drawing of the boundaries.
Right.
It affects whether or not there's capacity with the drawing of the boundaries to also incorporate those students, the grandfathered students. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bridget?
So just +1 on the grandfathering idea. I think especially if it comes to fruition that we do a 6th grade academy as well, that's just a lot of transitions for different students, and it just, anything we could do to work around that. The first thing I wanted to do was also say that I had a kindergartner who was supposed to go to the closed school to Marks Meadows. So I sat here, and yes, the people on Amity Street had been previously moved in the past. But one thing that was really taken into consideration in that last redistricting, from what I understood and what made it hard to argue against in the room, was that there was a lot of consideration of equity in the border drawing. So I think looking back at that and making sure that we don't undo good work that was put into place at that time, in some ways the town has changed, but in a lot of ways, you know, the more wealthy neighborhoods are still more wealthy and vice versa. So, so something to look at. I'm wondering if there's been any sort of K-6 modeling on this. I know I'm gonna get stones thrown across the room at me, but I still want to put that possibility out there. I'm just not fully on board with the 6th grade academy idea yet. And I see like 4 additional classrooms at Crocker Farm in the shift, and so that's one thing. Maybe this is the next phase as well, but I'm really interested in having the numbers for the high needs balance across the buildings and what that looks like. And I don't think it's fair to include the preschool in that, since that's a cross-district program. Everyone will go to their own schools afterwards. And the very 2 final things that I'm thinking about, and these are probably just notes for the next phase as well, but the university neighborhoods, especially the family housing and places where the university students come, because that causes a lot of last-minute disruption as the school year starts. Like, can they be divided in some way, or not necessarily divided, but just configured as we think about it, so that one school I know this past year, Wildwood, had a lot of issues with that. And the very last thing I have is, like, will this new structure allow us to expand? I know there've been wait lists for Cominantes. I know that there's certain folks who would love to see their kids in the Ames program but aren't able to get served, those types of things. Can there be any sort of expansion in the number of kids who have the opportunity to take part in some of the amazing offerings we have here in Amherst.
Tim, you want me to jump in and try and say that? I'll take note, but I want to say that in the chart, when it comes to projected enrollment and our capacity, you start to see that in 2027, we peak at I think that year we're projected around 872, and I think 2030, we're at 875. So there are some considerations that we have to take into account, and that's why we're working to get feedback on this and keep it into like a consistent, a live document until we're able to provide the actual proposal. So I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm calling on myself now. So I have some input and questions, and I don't necessarily expect answers tonight. The first thing is, I'm glad to hear you say, Tim, that one of the goals is to minimize disruption, minimize the number of students who have to who have to change schools, because obviously both schools are wonderful, and if we were starting from scratch and just plopping kids down from day one into schools, this would be different. But I also +1 the idea of grandmothering students into the school that they're in. To the extent possible, I would also suggest that you think about a policy for younger siblings of those students, because as much as parents don't like their kids having to change schools, parents also don't like when their children can't go to the same schools as their siblings. So just something to keep in mind. Tim, I'm looking at page 14, the Crocker Farm to the new school transition. I had a similar question to one of the public commenters about we're moving kids from, or this proposal is moving kids from Crocker Farm to the new school and moving kids from Fort River to Crocker Farm. Like, why are we moving? And I see that the scales are different. There's only really five students, existing students, who would move from Fort River to Crocker Farm. And then 28, 39, but not
39.
including the fifth graders.
And pre-K.
Right, who move. And so I see the scale is different. But like, when I look at this page 14, it looks like you've got Amity Street / Main Street as your northern border. But I feel like Northampton Road / Belchertown, I don't know, Massachusetts likes to change names of streets, is more of a natural, that one that goes like this is, I don't know, I could be wrong, is more of a natural boundary. Would it change things at all to make that the boundary, the upper boundary for Crocker Farm? And would that lessen, if we do that and swap out the 5 students for, I don't know, just, you don't have to answer this right now, but would
Yeah,
that?
I can't.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes, the answer is it would change.
Yeah,
What is
of
the
course.
magnitude of the change? I don't know.
Yeah, so that's just something to consider if we swap out those students for the Fort River, the ones on Southeast Street that have to move, would those numbers make sense at all? It's just a thought. And then, okay, I'm glad Deb brought up population islands, because I could be wrong, but we currently have 2 islands smack in the middle of the Crocker Farm district on East Hadley Road in those apartment complexes that are currently in the Crocker Farm district, but they get sent to Wildwood and Fort River. And this is a decision many school committees ago made that has caused much consternation. We haven't talked about those students in this analysis. I don't even see them on your map. So there are 2 islands currently. Those students are currently going to Wildwood and Fort River, but they are going to transition according to this, and they're going to go to Crocker Farm. Or would they be grandmothered in, whatever, granted in? We haven't talked about them, so I'd like to make sure we add them to the number of students who are transitioning, because they're speaking in general terms, those apartment complexes are often populated with low-income families. They're less likely to be paying attention and to show up at meetings and submit their public comment. I want to make sure we're not forgetting about them. So that's all I had to say. And Tim, I'm going to compile all this for you and send you all of our questions and comments in an email so that you can keep track of everything that we've said.
Great, yeah, thanks.
Okay.
You might see me typing. That's one of the things
Sure.
I've been trying to do, is keep track of all this. But yeah, and again, I think from our perspective, and it's an important just reiteration of the fact that part of this is initial in order to get everyone to understand the process and to understand the inputs that we're looking for, and in order to make some of these iterative kind of changes. We can't iterate ad nauseum because we eventually have to open the school. So, one of the things that we will do is get a sense for, are any of the projected changes of such an order of magnitude that they are going to be material, or are they not? right? And so we'll be able to help everybody understand what that is. And again, part of that will be ensuring that everyone understands, as we are trying to balance the scales of all of the things that you all are concerned about, to what degree, to what degree does a potential change have a substantial impact? To what degree is it a pretty limited impact? And recognizing that a small impact overall might be a big impact to an individual family. I completely understand that and get that. But in the same way that we can't identify seat one available to an individual student, there are some of those things that we're going to have to look at the more macro level.
Thank you. Sarah, go ahead.
So I just want to add on to some of the points that have been made about these, what look like extra rooms, and now Bridget is not the only person who wonders, wow, can we get the sixth grade into these schools after all? I don't know. I bet there'd be no flexibility in enlarging any grade if that were the case, and you also couldn't enlarge Cominantes if you were using those rooms for, let's say, sixth graders. So, I'm interested. I would be interested to hear, maybe from Dr. Z, like, well, what would you do? What would we do for the first few years with these extra rooms? I mean, because we don't want brand new empty classrooms, or even in Crocker Farm, just sitting there unused. I mean, that would be disturbing. As far as the looking at trying to get the demographic balance, the Cominantes program is one that students go into by, I mean, there's a lottery, but it's also choose to apply to that program. So it will have its own demographic makeup, and I wonder if it would be fair or right to then like compare it to the other schools, or because it's not a random, because it's definitely not a random population there.
But I think to the degree that we are looking at the populations in total and at the specifics for each of the individual schools, in essence, one of the things that we would see, one of the things that we would see in the crosstab is the number of Cominante students and where they are and how that fits. And so there's a way to both consider and extract that from the way that we look at it, I think.
Okay. And then the last thing, just about the grandfathering, I can imagine several different ways to do it. It's like if you're in the school now, no matter what grade, you can stay there and all your siblings coming on after you. Or maybe it's just the rising fourth and fifth graders and their siblings. So when you explore that, maybe think of a variety of ways that concern could be addressed. Yeah, that's it.
We will. Tim, just to confirm, so that I can answer Sarah's question. In this current model, I know we discussed it in our last meeting, but this current model, these are just Amherst students. Our projections currently don't include our school choice numbers, correct?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. So there's approximately 80 students that are included now that are school choice.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, those students are included back in the analysis. We had taken them out originally, but given the fact that they've been accepted into the schools and stuff like that, we've factored them back in.
All right, I'm going to call you in a second, Deb. It's 8:10. We've talked about this a lot. We're giving input to Tim on this draft. So I would like us to think about if you are done, or if you can just continue to give some, wrap up with giving some constructive feedback. Deb, and then Bridget, and then we're going to close out.
So this is not constructive feedback. I'm sorry, but I'm going to ask anyway. When one of the benefits of bringing the two schools together is to be able to equalize distribution, the two schools, to have 5 classes in one building is to equalize distribution, so you don't wind up with 2 large classes in a grade or 3 small classes in a grade. That to me is a huge benefit for this scenario. However, when you have Cominantes within that, you lose a lot of that economy of being able to do that. So I think it's an important thing for me to understand the impact of keeping Comandantes in the new, in that building, and how that affects your ability to equalize class sizes within the Explorers, if that's what we continue to call it, the Explorers group. Did that, anytime I try to explain that question to people, I get blank looks, so I don't know if that.
So I'm going to say that couple things. We have, as a district, been working on the approved 2021 educational program for the district, which outlines that in this new school, all programs, including Caminantes, will be placed in the school.
Right.
What we have, I think, as we have the programmatic discussion, what we are looking for is the ways to address those inequities, but to balance the programming. So that's the critical conversation around the scheduling. That's the conversation around what's happening as we roll out. What's going to happen as well is the considerations on the capacity of the building and the classrooms around class sizes. So can you send, just so that we can answer it, I think that's more of a programmatic question.
Yep.
Because a lot of what Tim rolls out in his projections are based on the programmatic questions that we put forth with him. And I know that we had a meeting, the last meeting was with the principals where they provided feedback. And so, and I know they've been providing Tim some feedback. I think we're going to circle back and have a debrief with him and kind of bring in some of our additional capacity. So this is ongoing work, but we would like to make sure that as we do the programmatic part and we feed into what which feeds to what Tim is doing, that we're also addressing your concerns.
Okay, and then I did have a question for Tim that's relevant. So you're predicting a peak at 875 and then a decline after that? At 2029, 2030, because that's 575 plus 300. That is Crocker plus the new school.
That is peak.
What's the next bar look like?
It goes back up.
It goes up further than 875.
Oh, you're asking after 2030?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, after 2030, we haven't projected out that far. I mean, we haven't.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't mean it to sound sassy. I mean, that's really, really important to me. And I assume other people as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, we certainly can look, and again, I think, one of the things that we can go out ad nauseum, they get increasingly fuzzy after.
Yeah, you can put
5 or
some
6
error
years.
bars on it. I can deal with error bars, but I also need to know absolute values.
Yeah, which we will provide.
Okay, Bridget gets the last word.
The reason that the Comandantes sort of locations where those students are going to school is it's gonna factor into the busing and the transportation schedule, because we've had a problem in the past where there's been like relay buses or different situations like that. And so if we could iron out some of that in this plan. And then I'm not sure it's a question for you, Tim, but there's a great map of the new school in here, and I'd love to see that with what the proposal then looks like for Crocker Farm as well, so that we can really get the whole district picture as we're looking at both elementary schools.
And I do have one final question.
Okay.
Sorry. It took me forever to get on, but I'm a numbers person, so I'm looking at what Desi says we have in our K through 5, maybe that's it. I just don't see how the DESI numbers agree with what the 847. I understand that we don't have the same numbers. The numbers that DESI has, no, they are, is last year's numbers, but I'm really confused. If you could look at that number and look at your number and help me understand the variation between the two, that would really be helpful.
Sure.
Okay, yeah. We'll email Tim that question. Thank you. All right, thank you so much, Tim, for answering all our questions and for putting together this very comprehensive presentation.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. I'm just going to jump to the first slide because we all know that this part is the district update on the K-6. So in terms of naming of the new schools, and I'm sorry for not putting the S, but new school, we do have a QR code and a bit.ly going out. We've, so far, in terms of progress, we launched this at the first day, right? First day event. I was going to say first day event. And thus far, we have approximately, I believe, about 40 or so suggestions for the name of the new school. We reached out to the town today to ask them if they could put it on their website. We did ask a couple of businesses. We even bombarded Bridget on the way. I said, please put this in UMass. And we will be sharing it via our social media platform. So please, our timeline in terms of what we plan to do is that we would like to stop calling it the new school. And it's actually 2 sites because the 6th grade has to be named as a school within DESI. So we actually have 2 names that we're trying to collect. So 9/22 is when we plan to close the collection of names because what we would like to do is at each of the Amherst Elementary School open houses, we'd like to have the names like voted on so we could get the most popular opinions and choices. So by the end of October, when all of the open houses have occurred, we'll present the suggestions to the school committee. And then we're hoping that by the end of November, the school committee can assist us and make a choice and we can have a school name. So we could stop saying the new school and we could have a name for the 6th grade academy. In terms of the listening sessions, originally the first date was the 25th. And then there's a regional school committee that got planned right in the middle of the first listening session for parents. So I moved it to the 18th, but then there was a conflict of the block party, thank you. And so in consultation with various parents, about 5 or 6, thank you to all of you who answered my emails until late in the night and early this morning. We were able to find a Saturday, 1-hour Saturday time to host the September listening session. I did not want September to end, and I did not hear from the parents around questions and concerns and sharing information. So that'll be at 10 a.m. The 24th, the middle school staff, we want to talk with them. Then we have the 5th grade student sessions. The leadership teams will be going, myself, the 6th grade individuals, the schools, the leaders at the current sites will be in the rooms and listening to the 5th graders. We want to hear what their concerns are. We want to hear what their thoughts are and to get some feedback from them. And then in terms of the Amherst K-6 staff on the 25th in the afternoon, we'll have a listening session for them. Again, the listening sessions are not so much for me to give answers, but to hear concerns so that we can start to craft our messaging that goes out for everyone, and also we can plan accordingly. Yes, Sarah?
Is the parent listening session virtual? Or
Yes, it's via Zoom.
Only, that it's not a hybrid, it's not like come to school or Zoom in?
No, so my listening sessions that I hosted last year actually worked better via Zoom. Like a lot of parents were able to log in from their car from home. Like it gave them more access than having them drive to a location. So I wanted to give them that flexibility.
Great, thank you.
Logistics and location. So we had a great presentation from Tim. And I want to start off by saying that when I came in, the conversation was, we are going to have declining enrollment. But our births and our projections do not support that. We are looking at class sizes. We are looking at the impact of school choice. We are looking at the number of classrooms truly needed. When the first presentation was made to the principals and we shared the numbers, one of the key things we looked at with the Crocker Farm number was the consideration of pre-K. We are going to be, I'm going to say the word bucking up, but we're going to be butting against the wall short, like in a year. We're going to have 1 year of some flexibility, and the following year, we're going to be, bless you, three seats away from capacity. And that doesn't consider if we take in individuals into the various specialized programs. It doesn't consider, like, there's a lot of considerations that we're still looking at. Yes, we've had conversations. We had a conversation with our regional reps around the 6th grade. And they have expressed some of the steps that we may or may not have to do to keep 6th grade from transitioning to the middle school. the problem that comes in is, do we have the capacity in our current buildings to keep sixth grade, right? And so, like, that's the balance of where we're at. Every document that I have received, the educational programming, the teachers who worked on the sixth grade model shared documents. Everything actually had the model where it was integrated within the middle school structure. And it seemed to have, the plan was to create a version of a middle school system, like a true middle school model. So we have identified some space, but again, I would like to have, and the team agrees, we need to have feedback from the middle school staff and teachers, and that's why, on the 24th, we have their listening session. Because they too had shared some information. There's a lot of conversation around the bathrooms. There's conversation around the lunchroom. Research shows, and we wouldn't be the first in Massachusetts. It may be new to Amherst, but middle school models are right down the street. Like, we have schools that are 612 in Massachusetts. It really may not always be ideal, but it's not new. And so what I do feel, though, is that how do we honor what's happening in the elementary district and making sure that we kind of do what we need to do for the social, emotional, and academic wellness of our sixth grade students. One of the key things that I shared in the update to the community was around the fact that because the sixth grade becomes now a standalone, a part of the logistics in our scheduling is the fact that because they are standalone and not joined to K-5, they now no longer abide by the 900 instructional hours. They now have to abide by 990 because they are now a secondary model. So, yeah, there's some things, Sarah. I see your brain moving. So we have been engaged in the different conversations around it. So we'll continue to have that in terms of creating the stronger educational program. Because what this educational program really focused on was K-5. A lot of the sixth grade educational programming was developed by teachers in the middle school and different things. And so I've gotten pieces of that, and the team, you were going to pull together to kind of mesh that into a strong educational program. Work has already been done. The schedule, I'm not going to say Mary's last name because I'm going to butcher it, but Mary has come in and done work with this schedule. She's taken the elementary schedule and kind of worked around what the elementary schedule may look like. So she will work with the leaders. And the one thing I was saying, and as I move to the next one is, and I repeat this, we've been working as a cohesive team. So this is not a Crocker Farm versus Fort River versus Wildwood versus middle school. This has been a cohesive team sitting together, having discussions, the true meaning of teamwork, like literally hoorah, and feedback. I'm not, like I said, I'm working on time, but they stay on me like, hey, 2:30 today, you need to get something out, and we were all working in tandem together. And so everything in terms of K-5 and the sixth grade model, we're working in tandem together.
Before you go on, can I ask some questions about your past couple of
Yes.
slides? Okay, regarding naming the new school, I could be wrong, but I think that's a school committee decision.
So what I will say is I went to DESE, and they said that's within local control. I've asked individuals of the town. I've looked in the town charter. I have found nowhere that says who is supposed to. So I work for the school committee. I'm leaving at the school committee's door until I learn differently.
Perfect, great. So just looking at your timeline, and we'll talk about timing, but the October meeting is October 21st. The November meeting is November 18th. So you're saying end of October and end of November, if we can fit it in with those meetings. I'm not sure if the open houses will be over by October 21st, but if we could look at them in October and vote in November, that would fit in with our meeting schedule.
Okay.
And then regarding logistics and location and sixth grade transition to the middle school, so can you tell us what is the status of Caminantes in sixth grade since sixth grade moves to the middle school?
Can I say that currently we have not worked that into the educational model? Right now, we have had the discussion, but what that affects is our number of classrooms that was intended to be used. And so we have like a plan of how do we incorporate this and keep the essence of the program? What is this going to look like? And so I can't say that now, but I can say in our next update, we will be able to kind of give a more detailed understanding of what it would look like in the sixth grade.
more of an understanding of what sixth grade will look like, whether including Caminantes or not, we're not sure yet.
Right.
Okay, I just want to say, as, you know, as chair of the Amherst School Committee, I would like us to see us try to
Oh, we
fit
are.
Caminantes and to serve the students who are currently in fifth grade in Caminantes and deserve to have another year, and all the future students that deserve to have another year too. I understand that there's lots of moving parts, but I would like to see the district try to make that work.
So I don't want it to be said that we're not trying. We are trying. But what we are also trying to ensure is that in the current, in the model that we create, we keep to the essence of what the program is for. Because I believe at that point, is it sixth grade is 50-50? So fifth grade becomes 50-50, which means 50% of their instruction is in Spanish and the other 50% is in English. So that we have to have the discussion around transition of teachers. You know, what would this look like? Is it the students are going to move or the teachers are going to move? How does that lay out? What do we currently have? Who would transition forward? So the conversations have started, but I want to say that the model is not finalized. So we are trying to lay it out to make sure that whatever we lay out as the sixth grade plan includes keeping the essence of the programs from especially Caminantes.
Thank you. Deb and then Sarah.
In the interest of trying to think longer term, instead of going a year at a time, which is what we're really good at, when you have that conversation, can you think about the conversation that would be way more complicated, but also Caminantes, or what offerings would be available to those students at the regional level?
Yes, and I know all new educational programs have to be approved by the school committee, so it would have to be, and I heard the public comment this evening, it would have to be how we would build that into the program of studies at the region. So we could take that into consideration.
Thank you.
I'm going to I'll call on Sarah in a second, but I just want to say to that point, to parents who are listening and parents who are here who would like to see Caminantes continue into the middle school, I would urge you to direct your advocacy at the regional school committee, which oversees the middle school and the high school, regional school committee at arps.org, because that is the school committee that would need to make that happen, not this one. Even though we're all on it, it's confusing. It's a different school committee, different body. Sarah.
Thank you. Yes, you saw my eyebrows shoot up when Dr. So instructional hours explain, because these sixth graders are still elementary school students.
No. Okay, so, and this became quite where we were back and forth. So according to DESE guidelines, and you know, I just went through this wonderful instructional hours walkthrough, elementary students are considered K6, right? In that structure, in that configuration. Maybe even 3-6. When they are within that elementary school, students are required by law to have 900 instructional hours per year at minimum and 180 school days. Secondary students are considered 612. And students who are in, yes, I can send you the definitions.
No.
Okay,
go
and
ahead.
so students who are grade 612 are required to have 990 instructional hours per year. One of the things that per year at 180 days. What we realize is that when it becomes a standalone sixth grade, it is also considered a secondary school, like a secondary, like as a standalone. So the sixth grade academy will be considered a secondary, meaning that they now have to, by law, abide by 990 instructional hours per year per 180 days.
But they will still not be part of the regional school.
Right, they will
Okay.
not be part of, they
So
are not a
Amherst
part of the-
Elementary will suddenly also be Amherst Elementary and secondary, one grade of
No,
secondary.
it would be Amherst Elementary. You're a K6, so I had to wrap my mind around it. You are a K-6 district. However, you separated your sixth graders from the K-6 so in your configuration of the district, you have a K-5 model and a standalone sixth grade. You still remain as a K-6 district, right? However, one of your schools now have to operate under different stipulations because it is a standalone sixth grade.
So So this has happened somewhere else? There are standalone sixth grades that,
This is a unique,
I mean, I'm just baffled by why it matters where their classrooms are, whether they're considered.
it's the configuration of it is the configuration of the schooling.
You mean the physical configuration?
It is the actual configuration of the schooling, yeah. I can get further, I can send you and I can clarify, but those are all the considerations
Yeah.
that I feel, but this is where we're at.
Well, that sounds like you have so many things to do, but an important one to nail down because an extra 10% of instructional hours has a huge effect on the.
Correct.
It I would
changes
just
the academic
say, are
programming.
you sure? Just because
I
they're-
will
yeah.
I will check all of my documents that I have, and I will send you the one that shows it. And Tanya's shaking her head yes, because she went back and checked. Like, we've been going back and forth on this because, again, we're building the schedule. We're building the educational program. So as we do this, we are taking into consideration all of the shifts and changes as to what occurred. So I'll send you the documents. I'll go back to my email.
Bridget.
Just quickly, when you're considering the sixth graders, like, I'm thinking a lot about the loss of recess and the configuration. I know in my own experience, even transitioning to that in seventh grade, where the outdoor time is much more of a free-for-all and there aren't structured activities, that it can be a lot, and I'd love to see that considered in the sixth grade academy.
Don't make me into the recess conversation. Okay, so I'm going to say that under the definition, recess does not count towards instructional hours. We would have to then look at the instructional day, because if we look at the instructional day, then we would have to determine how we are increasing the day to meet the required hours. And I'm being reminded that in our meeting where we met with Desi to discuss the sixth grade school and how do we name it and how do we configure it, and we talked about principals, we talked about asking the question about who names, we were told that the sixth grade would have to abide by the 990. So those, I will say that in the drafting of the schedule, we've been having the conversation around recess and the instructional day. One of the things we are trying to garner is that we do not want to keep them longer in the day, because then, or a longer year period, because we have to abide by instruction hours. So we're also thinking about their stamina if we include 20 minutes of recess. It might be something that's great for them as we transition to, but then we would also have to abide by a different instructional year, because that 20 minutes is going to add up to loss of instructional time, because we wouldn't want to extend their school day. Yeah. So we are, I just don't, we are being very diligent, mindful, and intentional about how we present this, how we work with this. The leadership team is here, like we are, and they're here because they have been reminding me, like, we have to be very intentional. Like, last time this happened here, Dr. Z, this is what has happened. I've also been reminded that the conversation about moving sixth grade has been ongoing and moved and shifted to the point where now we're here where we have no choice but to possibly move sixth grade, because we built a school less than the capacity of the two schools that we consolidated. I just want to put it out there. So, this is the reality of what we're moving towards. It is not possibly the ideal that everyone would want, but it's also where we are at, and what we are trying to do is to ensure that the best interests of our children are kept at the forefront. So I will get that information for you. And we were taking into account what that 20 minutes would do to the impact of them, because the 20 minutes adds up. We just went through that with the flex block and the guided study conversation at the middle school. So we know that could add up and cause us to then have to possibly extend the school year for one grade level or the day.
I'm going to have Dr. Z go on with your presentation. And we
Yes.
can take more
Okay,
questions.
so leadership update. I wanted to start off by saying what sites will be operating in 2026, 2027. We often forget that we have an early childhood center. So I think of Amherst as having 4 sites. I don't think of it as only having 3 sites. However, so we would still have 4 sites that we would be operating, and I need to repeat this because I've been saying this repeatedly since I've gotten here. So we would have Crocker Farm, the new elementary school, early childhood, and our 6th grade school academy, whatever we name it. Then the leadership structure right now that we have intention is we will carry forth with the Crocker Farm principal and assistant principal. The new elementary school, because of the heaviness of the programming, their leadership structure will have to would possibly be a principal, assistant principal, and then additional leadership supports, because I'm going to say all specialized programs there. And I attach the school layout for the classrooms to the presentation so everyone can have that. I also attached the MSBA letter that was presented to the town, outlining, like, you know, where the ideals were and the projections over K-5, so everyone, and that's like references. But because all of the programs would be in the school, we may need additional leadership support, and it may not just be another assistant principal. It may show up like in our secondary schools as an ETL, like those types of things.
Sorry, what is that, ETL?
Thank you.
Team
I kind of zoned out, education team leader, and that's right. And in the region, those individuals primarily assist with our special education programming and things like that. We would also, like every program, our English learners are at the school. And so then we would have the early childhood center. Our pre-K program is growing, and it's actually taking legs, and to me, it has the opportunity to grow into its own school, and I think we should start to plan for that and project for that. You notice a lot of Tim numbers on the bottom. His slide says does not include pre-K, does not include pre-K. Our 6th grade school, every model every document that I received called for like an integration of 6th grade into the middle school. And so ideally one of the things I kind of learned and didn't learn in this conversation is there was a history of co-principals that didn't work well in the districts. And having multiple leaders. Also, in the ideals of sharing staff, we would then be kind of shifting their working conditions by having them report to like a gen ed science teacher. The idea was, you know, having content specialists teach the 6th graders as well, like creating those opportunities. We would then be splitting staff and having individuals report to multiple leaders. But in that, we also wanted to create a leadership team that focused solely on the 6th grade model. And that's the idea of having a dedicated 6th grade assistant principal for the 6th grade school. And then what other leadership supports they may need, for example, coming into having their own ETL as well, their own educational team leader to support 6th grade. So the leadership would have a centralized principal of the building and of middle school and 6th grade, but then the 6th grade itself would have a dedicated assistant principal and ETL to help with the leadership of that program. With that, today we announced who our leaders will be, and they are awesome, so I'm going to say a couple points about each one. We're going to start off with Tammy, and Tammy has had over 20 years of service, especially, I believe, in this district as a special education teacher. She holds a special needs license, pre-K-9, and her administrator license. She started Fort River as a principal in 2022. If you have had the joy or experience of being within her shadow and basking in her glory, you'll understand that Tammy is an innovative thinker. She's a person that can take the now and project future. She speaks about herself in terms of process and protocols, but there's such a dynamic to Tammy that if you have 5 minutes to even engage in a conversation with her, she will take you to a place where research can take you, and also to a place where logic can take you. And she is that balance in many conversations where she takes the time to understand what's in front of her, to see where something can go, what does the data say, what does the research say, and create a whole new picture. And so Tammy will be leading Crocker Farm in the upcoming school year, and I'm very, very excited about this. Allison has over 8 years of service to the district. She started off as a special education teacher at Wildwood. She became the Wildwood assistant principal in August. I had to write all these notes down because I get very nervous when I'm talking about special people, so I have my notes written down. She became Wildwood assistant principal in 2018, and if you read the article about her, when she transitioned and took over for Nick Yaffe from Wildwood in 2023, Allison is a person who also leads with her heart and leads in terms of, I would say, empathic leadership. And so she holds elementary 1 through 6 moderate disabilities and her administrator license. She has strong and steady leadership after Nick's retirement. She's respected among her colleagues. And the one thing that I would say about Allison is that when you are able to stand in her shadow, and this is me, you kind of feel guided and also held. Allison has a way of coming in and supporting what is there, what is now, but what can be. And this is what made this decision very, very difficult, because they are both very dynamic, very talented, strong leaders. Allison has a way of walking in and supporting you in your thought process of moving forward. And I'm talking about as her leader and the things that she has done for me. She also finds a way to create the new and have you understand it as she is creating it. So you are not distant from the process. You are in that creation process with her. And so I'm truly excited about Allison at the new elementary school. For the 6th grade school and middle school, we have Principal Rodriguez. Couple things that I want to talk about with Principal Rodriguez is in terms of, one, he is currently the principal of the middle school. He holds his DESE provisional principal license for grades 5 through 12, and so he is licensed. He is and credentialed. He is a graduate of Amherst College. He completed Harvard's University School Leadership Program for his master's. And in Chicago, he was certified in both mathematics and Spanish. He has strong instructional leadership and commitment. I will say, if it's one thing that Wang has done that has reaffirmed me in where we are moving for the upcoming year, it's been the start of this school year. The middle school is not without its own slate of issues. The school schedule had started in terms of our 7 drop 1. It was already being developed prior to our guidance counselor transitioning in the summer. We all know, I think it was like August 17th or 18th, a Friday afternoon at 5 p.m. I remember where I was sitting down when I got the email from DESE saying, you need to submit this correct, not August, Lord, was it July? I have to remember, but I remember where I was and saying we had to shift the schedule. Immediately, and what we were approved to do, immediately, Principal Rodriguez was without the guidance counselor who actually built the schedule. And within a 2-week span, we have the quote from Power School that said, you were able to, in 2 weeks, do what would have taken about 3 or 4 months worth of work. It has not been easy. It has not been perfect. What he has done, which makes me confident in the work that he will be able to do, is he has always been solution-oriented, but he has still been communicating. He has still held the children in the work that they do. He's built relationships, and again, has it been easy? No. But he has been diligent in what it is that he has been able to do. And so with his background as a teacher and coach, in his ability to problem solve and to be accountable and to be a team player, because the one thing that I am sure in, he's not listed here, but he is our support, is Mr. Derek Shea has committed to, prior to him leaving, to supporting us in this whole transition. And so he is also, the 4 of them work as a critical team to ensure that Amherst has what they need. And we will continue to work as a team to ensure that our messaging, our communication, and our program development is strong. The selection of assistant principals for the new school and the 6th grade will begin in January. If we can start it earlier, we will. Ideally, we would like to. And then ongoing considerations. This is very critical. We'll continue to consider our enrollment and capacity, making sure we have our adequate classroom space. What are those projections? Deb, we had already started talking in our little text message on the side around, hey, maybe we should push out another 2-3 years to see where we're going to go afterwards. Grade configurations, the most developmentally appropriate structure for K-5 with 6th grade at the middle school. Early education center, we're going to have to see, as we push up against the space in our actual functional capacity, do we need to relocate the early education center to allow for K-5 to have adequate space at Crocker Farm? These are real conversations that we're having. We want to make sure that we're going to talk about the equity in redistricting in terms of making sure that there's more than just geography. We are looking at a socioeconomic balance and a representation as well, right? That students are within classrooms with individuals that represent them, and they're not sitting in classrooms, you know, that are not as diverse as we want our classrooms to be. And definitely at our conversation, and I wanted to hear parents say, we are considering the implications of leaving students in their current schools. We want to know, right now, like we said, we have 28 for one school, we have 5 for another. We want to make 5 or 4? 5. We want to make sure that we are looking at the full implications, not just next year or the year after, but as they transition, what is that impact going to be? So, and then we are continuing, again, community and staff engagement. We're making sure that we, as we move, new concerns are going to come up. As we update, new things are going to unleash. And so we want to make sure that we are keeping the staff and community engaged in the process.
I'm calling on myself first, and then I'll bring up a cue. The decision about the 6th grade leadership. So I'm trying to keep my comments appropriate to this committee and to the elementary district. But I have to say that I'm aware that the start of the school year at the middle school has been bumpy. And from my perspective, from the outside perspective, from a school committee member who's talked to parents and some students as well, it's still bumpy. And so I was surprised, and I'm not filled with confidence yet at the idea of the current middle school principal being principal of the middle school and the 6th grade next year. These 6th graders who are going to be moving next year's 6th graders, we're asking a lot of them. They're doing something that we've never done before. We're like experimenting on them, and it's up to us to make sure that they're cared for and that they're held and that they're supported. So I'm glad to hear you say that you have confidence, but I'm not there yet.
So the one thing I will say is that thank you for your feedback. We can acknowledge, and I will acknowledge, that it has been bumpy. I will also acknowledge that there are certain things that are innate to a school district. Did we have hiring issues? Yes. Was there an issue with scheduling? Yes. Did we have to find an interim guidance counselor because of a current legal situation where, yes. Is it going to smooth out? Yes. And so I ideally feel that school has been in session about, I'm going to say, I may not misquote. 3 weeks. And I did not send my regional update. So for example, I just thought about it Tuesday. For example, 4 of the critical positions that we were worried about, we've already identified candidates for and sent offers to. There is still one critical position. There is still one critical position that we are advertising in, but it is not something that is like Amherst specific. Like it's not. It's like, oh, it's only because of the middle school we can't find this. But no, this is a position nationally that we have difficulty in. I will say that the leadership of the school and his leadership, I can see where if you're looking at public perception and you're hearing one side and not experiencing and seeing it in terms of instructional leadership capacity, what we're looking at in terms of, even if we take the DESE guideline in terms of what leadership looks like, I see something different. The team sees something different. And I think that Mr. Rodriguez should not be judged on the start of a school year that with implications beyond just him. I think that he should be given a fair opportunity to present himself and talk about what he can do. Because I guess I have a bias and a different lens, but I know, given an opportunity, I've seen what he can do in a short matter of time. It has not been an easy road, no. When 2 to 3 weeks before school start, you have to submit a action plan by August 1st. You have to wait and repeatedly see if that action plan is in place. So if it was approved, and then you're pushing your schedule as is with what you had, and within the drop of a dime, about 2 weeks before school start, you have to make a critical change. Master scheduling is not something that happens in 2 weeks without without the support. And so for me, I would say that it's unfair to lay that and say that's a testament to his leadership. I would say that in time, given the opportunity to get to know who he is as a leader and give him the time to truly present the things that he has or is able to do, that is a better opportunity for it, and it will smooth out.
Thank you. Irv?
Yeah, I
And then
think
Deb.
that at this point in time, we can separate out sixth grade from the middle school and have the middle school discussion in relationship to leadership issues take place at the regional meeting, not here.
Okay.
Thank you, Irv. Deb?
I'm going to plus one what you said, Jennifer. Thank you for addressing that. I think in terms of constructive feedback, that being a little bit proactive in communication would be, regular updates would be really helpful to the community. And Power School access would be, I have parents who would like to be able to log on to Power School to see assignments, whether they're complete, support their student in that. So that would, I think, go a long way. And then I'm just going to say what Jennifer said, which is middle school is a hard transition for everyone. The communities, the families that have stuck with us through that transition, and not all of them have done it based on a leap of faith. And I think we need to go the extra distance and really reassure them that we have their backs. And it needs to be that much better than just great. We really just need to have a really, really strong presence in the community from middle school leadership in terms of that communication.
I will say that I agree, but I would say not just because of who the leader is. I think because this entire process is one that the parents and the community needs to be engaged in, needs to be comforted in. This is a major transition for Amherst. This is one that's not an easy one. And so I find that, I'm going to say this, I find that regardless of who was selected, it would be difficult because of the fact that we now have to walk into a situation where the building itself, individuals have concerns about going to the middle school. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tie this to an individual. I'm going to tie this to what this is. That there is discomfort amongst the community around the sixth grade school. There is discomfort around what's going to happen. So regardless of what we did or didn't do, there would be discomfort. It is now our term as a district and my turn as a leader to show and shape and comfort the community in the fact that we are going to keep their children safe. We are going to educate them like we are charged to do, and we are going to do what we can do. And I feel like as we have our community listening sessions, as we talk about probably inviting parents into the middle school to kind of walk and see, here, this is what our thoughts are, and get feedback, that will start to assuage some of the concerns, and it's going to bring up new ones. It's going to be just like the release of the boundaries document. So I just want everyone to know that this is not tied to a person. This is tied to the entire process being one that is jarring. And so I think that the team, and I know that the team can come together and we can work to provide a level of confidence, and again, I'm not tying this to a person, but to the plan. Everything that I have received as a superintendent has been around the plan. And like those are the concerns. What is the plans for my students? What is this going to look like? What is going to happen? That is where our focus lies, and I have a strong enough team that we have started to move in that direction. We've presented where we are moving and what our statuses are, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you, Dr. Z. Sarah, last word.
I think we heard from a parent, I don't remember if it was in written public comment or in person earlier, mentioned something I've also been wondering about, and that's the special education programs, like the AIMS and the building, but whatever they are, intensive learning center, that are in the elementary schools. If those are currently open to sixth graders, how will sixth graders be served who need those services when they are no longer in the building?
So we have those services at the middle school, right? Because we have the AIMS and the specialized programs at the middle school. When we talk about the fact like the educational program wasn't as laid out for the middle school as it was like, hey, everything is going to the new school and this, and this, that is the same here. So we are making sure that the services that we need to provide are available for our students who need them, and we have them in a structure. One of the things that DESE reaffirmed us for is that we have to make sure financially that we clearly draw the lines. Like, we're not blending lines, and like when they ask us for our documents, like that's one of the things that they want to make sure that we're clearly financially drawing the lines. That's what makes the difference. It's two completely separate districts. So we understand that we would have to possibly be running two AIMS programs, one specifically for sixth grade versus one for the middle school programs. Those are all things that we are hashing out, and we're going to have finalized, and we lay out the educational program for sixth grade.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Z.
You're welcome.
It's 9 o'clock. We're going to do Q4 budget update, and then I will have a suggestion about the rest of our agenda, but I want to make sure we get to this.
Thank you, everybody.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead, Shannon.
Okay. So for the Q4 budget update for FY25, overall Amherst School District concluded on target. We were, our final balance was $5,750.68 at the end of the year. So we used just about close to every penny that we possibly could. Our salaries landed right on target at 99%. Our contracted work was slightly over by $7,000, not bad at all. Our substitutes were over budget, and that's partly due to leave of absences that had to be covered and staff absenteeism. So we'll continue to look at that in FY26 and see where we trend. The expense lines are where we had our higher overages in certain lines, specifically our special education. We had an unprecedented amount of students move into the district that needed I'm sorry, it was a lot of students that moved into the district that had very high needs and required certain programming, and we had unfilled positions that also, I'm sorry. Just give me 1 second.
No problem, Shannon.
Okay, I am so sorry.
No worries.
Okay, so the just trying to figure out where I left off.
Unfilled position.
Yes, unfilled positions. We also had high or out of district out-of-district placements and tuition and transportation costs that had affected our special education expenses. And the one thing that we did in the FY25 budget was how we determined where we were going to apply school choice. Most of the time, we apply school choice in a salary line, and what it does is it reduces that budgeted amount, and then come to the end of the year when we actually apply it, we put it there. In this year for 25, we had put 150,000 to help offset some of the out-of-district placement and transportation costs, and it would, in fact, what it did was, if you looked at the special education budget, it had reduced the budget line to lower than what it should have been, because that's where we were going to apply school choice. However, after I met with Desi and we were looking at our maintenance of effort, if we had applied that 150,000 to the special ed lines, what it does, that doesn't count towards our maintenance of effort. The only exact cost that we spend on special ed that hits our operating budget and hits our circuit breaker counts towards MOE. If we apply school choice, that 150,000 doesn't count. So we did not apply it there. So it's 150,000 more than we anticipated. I mean, it's still over budget, but it's even higher because of that. So we applied it elsewhere, because if we did not meet maintenance of effort, which means we have to spend the same or more in special education from the prior year, it could impact us not being eligible for our IDA grant, which is a significant amount. There's also a piece that you have to put away a certain percentage of those funds because of that. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'm not sure if everybody is aware of that stipulation, but it's something that we look at when I complete the end of year reporting, and we didn't want to have that impact. Had I realized that at the beginning with the 25 budget when it was originally made, we probably wouldn't have applied it there. If it was done there in the past consistently, it wouldn't have affected our MOE, because that would have been the consistent practice year over year, and it wouldn't affect it. But this was the first time, and we realized that we won't do that again. Part of the reason is school choice. A lot of the school choice money that comes in, it's $5,000 per student, and then we receive other school choice money when a student choices into our district and has higher needs, and we charge the other district for that money. So a lot of the school choice money that supports the budget is for school claims, which does come from special education, but because we didn't have the past practice of always applying it towards special education, it's really difficult to start that process, and that's what we were hoping to do, but ended up not doing. So with ELL, that was higher than we had anticipated. Originally, I had reported that I thought this was going to come in under budget, but we had some billing issues with the vendor that we were using. However, we have a new system in place, thanks to Tanya and Lindsay, and that will streamline the billing process and ensure that we get those invoices processed not at the end of June when all of a sudden they hit and we thought it was going to be unencumbered, but we actually had to pay for those services. So it was a little bit misleading at the last budget update. For transportation, that came in higher than I anticipated, than we originally projected, and that was partly because we had bought two used school buses, and which I mentioned at a prior quarter update as well. That purchase was shared amongst the districts, so that is why transportation had ended up slightly over budget. And lastly, our administration administration expenses were higher than we originally did, and that's partly because of the strategic planning that we're doing and the work that we're doing with Mary and Tim around the presentation that Tim is helping us with, that the work that he's doing, and Mary around the scheduling And lastly, we still have high legal fees, and we had additional audits that we did in 25 that added pressure to this line. I do want to, the one last thing I want to point out is if you look at our risk and benefits, it's way under budget. So then you're thinking, well, maybe we didn't have as much insurance and we way over projected that, but that is not the case. We had ESSER funds that we had to spend by September 30th. So you'll see that it's not spent in full, and part of that reason, the main part of that reason, is because that's where we applied ESSER. It was easy to just scoop up from one quick bucket and identify it, so when we talk about this in the future and we see actuals and compare, we can tell what happened in that line as opposed to it being spread out. So with that, I will take any questions, and again, my apologies for the beginning.
No worries, Shannon. Questions, Sarah and then Deb?
Thanks, Shannon. I believe we voted end-of-year transfers back in June. So do we need to do more of those? If you are telling, if you're, it sounds like you're telling us that the situation is different, turned out to be different than what you anticipated it would be in June when we had those votes. So do we need to do anything more?
No, and actually that's a really good point because I did not include what those budget adjustments were on here. So the original versus revised doesn't reflect that, but I will certainly ensure that's included in the future.
Thanks. Deb?
When we
Would it be appropriate to request a memo for the 150K, just because I know that's going to come up in future conversations? It would be good to have that as a document with the towns about why that expense line looks higher than it might have otherwise.
Sure, I'm happy to put together some, like a formal memo that explains it and lays it all out. Yeah.
Just something we can hand off and meet that scrutiny, which I bet is coming our way. So that's great. How much ESSER funds were applied to the risk and benefits, do you know? Or if you don't, if you could send that to me too.
Yep, I don't know off of the top of my head, but I can look at that. I will just write that down.
Okay.
And can get back to you.
Yeah, of course. And then maybe break down that, the district-wide support, as I have perhaps in the past with other lines that are that much over, just so we can get a sense of how, just as a committee, how to plan, how to formulate the conversation going forward.
Yeah, district-wide support, meaning the one with 41,000 or
District-wide
district-wide
special ed, I think is what you meant.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I misread the line. The one that's
Really big
so
one.
much
Yeah.
over. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. And one last thing I do want to note is we had said for the FY26 budget, we were hoping that we would have 150,000 in savings from school choice for this year to help offset the FY26 budget. So I do want to tell you that that in fact did happen. So I was able to not apply 150 of school choice, which helped balance this, and that's what I expected anyways. And that is great for FY26, just so everybody knows that.
Good job. Thanks. All right, I'm going to close out this agenda item, and I'm going to say Dr. Z and Megan and Shannon and anyone, you guys, I think the rest of our business is school committee business, so it's fine with me if you guys want to head home. And
Thank
so
you.
for the school committee, it's 9:10, so we went longer than I had wanted to. We've got School Equity Advisory Committee, which is a discussion and a vote. I'm not sure how urgent it is for tonight. Joint Superintendent Evaluation Committee is just an FYI for me. Approving minutes, which we should probably do, and then approving gifts, which we should also probably do. Bridget, do you want to do the School Equity Advisory Committee tonight? Or can it wait till?
The main thing is that we're having the School Equity Advisory potluck on September 24th, and we would like to be able to say that it is also an elementary school committee to join. I would say that everything else entailed in the presentation, everyone on this committee has heard. So, and you all requested that I bring it to this meeting.
Right.
So if there's discussion that needs to be had, I would move it forward. But if not, I have a little motion at the end. We could take a quick vote.
Why don't you make the motion and then we'll see if there's discussion.
Okay, sure. Amherst Elementary School will join the regional schools in SEAC membership, SEAC being the School Equity Advisory Committee. The Amherst School Committee commits to include the performance measures district-wide related to equity in the annual superintendent's goals. In addition, it approves of the caregiver parent-led format, the proposed 25-26 calendar for SEAC, which is above, and its outreach and communication plan, which just ensure that Seth communicates to the committee, to the community at large, that we're holding SEAC meetings, that some of them are going to include the staff of the district to keep that sort of dialogue on school equity going between the community and the leadership in the district. And then, just basically that this committee supports the SEAC mission. That's what's most important, I think, to us.
I second the motion. Is there any discussion? Sarah and then Deb.
Yeah, actually, I think this is too much for one motion. So maybe we could divide the question. And first is, yes, yes, that we can let the elementary, I forget what how you word it.
Join the regional
Join
schools.
the regional committee.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
fine. Parts of it, the latter parts of that paragraph, I don't know that we need to vote on your communication strategy or your calendar. I mean, that seems like purely internal. I don't know why we would need to vote. We don't vote on the Special Education Parent Advisory Council's calendar or anything. And then the second sentence, I guess, about the superintendent goals, I actually would like to talk about that one a little bit, and I don't want to keep us here late, so if it's okay that we just vote on the first part?
Yep, I'm fine with that. I would say the reason those were included is because those were new structural elements to the design of SEAC, and this is the exact language that everybody voted in affirmative to at the region.
Sorry, so tired.
All right, so you're taking it as a friendly amendment to make the motion just that the elementary will join the regional schools in the SEAC membership?
Absolutely.
Okay, and I agree as a seconder. Deb?
I just want to say that as the SEAC liaison, Bridget, I really like the direction that the committee is going in terms of structure and perspective, and I don't have any problem at all voting that. I do have a little bit of concern what happens going forward, but I think going forward will be going forward. So I just did want to read that into the record, that it's a committee that has had really strong intervals of time and times where it's floundered a little bit. But I'm very supportive of it in its current state.
Great. So if there are no further comments, I'm going to say Jennifer votes yes. Deb?
Yes.
Irv?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
And Bridget?
Yes.
Great. So we were officially joining SEAC. Let's put this on a future agenda to talk about the other items. And we'd love to hear more for this committee to hear more about SEAC in the future.
Yeah,
That sound good?
absolutely. And please, everyone, come to the potluck at Groff Park on the 24th, 4 to 6. There'll be music, there'll be games, and there'll be an opportunity to give feedback on equity-related issues for us.
Great. Sarah?
Do it now. Do we need a Amherst liaison then?
We do, and that
do
is
we-
a chair call, and I'm going to appoint Bridget.
Do you accept it?
Yes, I'll accept.
Okay, great.
Great. Okay, I'm going to try to speed through the next items. The next item is the Joint Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee. So this body needs to vote to, I'm just going to make the motion now. I move to approve the Joint Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee to be composed of 2 members from the Regional School Committee, 1 member from Amherst, and 1 member from Pelham. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll give it to Deb. Is there any discussion? Jennifer votes yes. Deb?
Yes.
Irv?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
And Bridget?
Yes.
And, okay, and so appointing the Amherst rep to that committee is also a chair's decision. And my idea is to appoint Deb, since you are the regional representative to that committee. Am I right? I had to clarify this with the regional chair. According to the regional chair, Sarah Best is the Pelham rep, Tim and Deb are the regional reps. And I'm going to say Deb should also be the Amherst rep. Because on the one hand, I feel like larger subcommittees are better because you share the work, but on the other hand, sometimes slightly smaller is better for like scheduling and stuff. Are you okay being the Amherst rep?
I thought I was okay, give me a sec.
Okay.
That's the only thing I could be the rep for, right? I mean, related to the superintendent.
Yeah, the evaluation subcommittee.
Yes.
And this is,
Yes.
this is just,
So,
okay,
yes, of
great,
course. Yep,
perfect.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 sets of minutes. I'm going to start with moving that we approve the June 17th minutes.
Second?
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any comments, questions, or suggested edits? No? Okay. Actually, we don't have to do roll call. All those in favor? Thank you. And I didn't get a second, actually. Can I just get a second?
I did.
Oh,
no,
you
Sarah-
seconded,
yes,
great.
Sarah seconded.
And then I also move that we approve the August 19th Amherst School Committee minutes.
Second.
Thank you, Sarah. Any discussion? All those in favor? Excellent. Warrants have been posted. Lots of warrants were posted. I was very behind, so I posted a whole bunch of warrants. I'm going to skip reports from liaisons and subcommittees. I'll be sure to get that in to the next meeting. And really quickly, I move that we accept the following gifts from Martha Ulver, number 9970443, 9970664, 9970885, and 9971006 to support Crocker Farm at Principal's discretionary fund for a total of $40. And from the Garden Club of Amherst, number 1505, $500 each to Crocker Farm, Fort River, and Wildwood Garden Project for a total of $1,500 for a total cash total of $1,540. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Deb. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Thank you to
Thank
the
you.
generous gift giving people.
Excellent.
Givers.
Yes,
Givers.
very, yes. Future agenda planning, if you have any agenda items you'd like to see on future agendas, please email me.
Yep.
I move we adjourn.
Can I just,
Yeah. Oh.
I had a question because you flew through it. It's really just a question. Reports from liaison and subcommittees, what does that look like?
Good question. Report out on your meetings, any information you'd like to share.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor of adjourning? Thank you.
Thanks, Amherst Media.
Thank you,
I'm Esther. Esther. I'm running for.